Okay, who is ready for another episode of Hair Mistakes That Age You Faster, Subscriber Edition, Season 2, Episode 2. You ready to learn about some hair mistakes that could be aging you, and more importantly, how to get a little more of a youthful look? Okay, well, let's meet Lisa. There are some mistakes that are happening currently with Lisa's hair, and they, like I said before, are robbing some of that youthful look from her. But I'm going to break down exactly what those mistakes are, and more importantly, how Lisa can address those to get a more youthful look. So, yeah, pretty straightforward. Should we dive in? We should. Let's dive in. Okay, now, if you're a veteran of this series, you know exactly what's about to happen. I'm going to go ahead and show you some pictures of Lisa. Now, while I go ahead and explain to the new folks exactly what this series is all about, you go ahead and head down to the comments and let me know what you think the potential concerns are, and then we'll see how close you are. Sound good? Okay. Now, if you are new here, my name is Justin Hickox, and in this particular series, subscribers from this channel actually send me in photos with the question of, am I making any mistakes with my hair, and how can I get a more youthful look? Then I randomly pick from those submissions, and I choose someone and walk through exactly what potential concerns are happening, more importantly, how they can address them, and then actually show you on a Photoshop version of them what it would look like if they took my suggestions. And then usually at the very end, I throw in a little bit of a curveball, something that might be a completely different style than maybe what they have, or a different color or whatever, just to kind of show you different options. So yeah, pretty straightforward. And with that said, let's dive into the mistakes. Okay, we're gonna switch backdrops here in just a second to get into mistakes. Before we do that, I wanna read you the email that Lisa sent me so that you can get a better idea of kind of where my suggestions and my mistakes are coming from. Hi Justin, I enjoy watching and learning from your videos. So glad to have stumbled across them. I have baby fine hair. I'm okay with my current length. If I grow my hair much longer, it looks thin and stringy at the bottom, and the weight of the longer hair causes it to lay very flat on top. I have no problem going a little shorter, just not too short. I would love to have a more defined style. This is my natural hair color, but I am not opposed to having it colored at the salon. I feel my cut is too blunt and plain. I've asked my stylist for a bob several times, but I'm thinking we're not understanding each other. In doing a little research lately, I see that there are many different types of bobs. Not sure which one I should ask for. Please help. Well, we're gonna break down exactly what that looks like, so let's dive into some mistake. Now, mistake number one is that this side right here is just a little bit too thin. And I don't think that's actually so much Lisa's texture as it is that there's a little bit of layering going on right here. Now, I wasn't sure at first, but when you look at this profile shot, you see that her hair doesn't look thin at all. And when you look at this front-on shot, you see that it looks like there's a little bit of layering right in this one section. Now, that part being overlayered is something that happens super often when it comes to bob shapes, and it makes this whole bob line look a little bit too thin, and it may be part of the reason that Lisa feels like as her hair gets longer, it starts to look thin and scraggly at the ends. There is a definite part of this being her texture, but I think maybe that problem stems more from partly her texture, but it's also compounded by layering. Now, mistake number two is that it's just a little bit too long in the back, and this is something that I constantly talk about when it comes to bob shapes. Now, in Lisa's particular situation, it's not even that it's parallel to the floor, it's actually a little bit longer in back than it is in front. Now, this brings the eye down the back of the shape and really doesn't do justice to what a bob shape can do for Lisa. And this may play into why she's not loving the overall shape of her bob. Now, mistake number three is actually something that Lisa talked about in her email, which is that she doesn't feel like there's enough layering or shape cut into it. And I would have to agree. There's just not quite enough beveling or overall layering in general. Now, this may sound kind of off after I just said in mistake number one that it was overlayered on one side, which was creating a look of thinness. But with that said, layering isn't the culprit. It's how hair is layered that can be a culprit. So having some even just slight beveling to the back of Lisa's bob would not just lift the eye up the shape, it would probably go a long way to getting her into that bob shape that she's been wanting. Now, mistake number four is really kind of less of a mistake, and it's kind of more of a suggestion. Now, she did mention in her email that she was open to getting color done, and I actually think that that would be a really good move for her, but probably not the kind of color that you're thinking of. So the color I'm thinking is more out of a process of making her hair look denser. If we were to actually color just the bottom line of her hair, so just so you know, that's basically, if I take my hat off here, yeah, I actually have hair. I don't always wear a hat. This recession line to the back right here, okay, the occipital bone, everything below that, if she dyed all of that a darker color, and she could still highlight the top or do whatever she would need to do to still feel like she wasn't maybe too dark for herself, just having this depth goes an incredibly long way in making hair look thicker, especially on bob shapes. So oftentimes I will tell clients, if they've got any sort of finer hair texture or thinner hair, a really good idea is if you're gonna cut that strong line of a bob into the shape, dye this stuff down here a bit darker, and it'll create a little bit of a shadow, creating the illusion that that line is actually thicker than it even is. So that's my suggestion. There's a massive eagle right over here. Oh, there's two. Wow, okay, sorry. That is so cool. All right, so now let's take a look at these suggestions and see what it would actually look like if Lisa took my advice. Fair enough? Okay. Oh, and wait a minute, real quickly. Watch this real fast. Have you ever had one of those experiences that was so good that you just had to try to recreate it? That is exactly what this vlog was supposed to be, but instead, it turned out being the day that I found a $1,000 laxative. And this is that story. So if you haven't seen that yet, that I am super excited about. That is the very first little part of my wife and my very first video that we just uploaded, just went live on our brand new adventure travel channel. Yes, we're actually creating an entire YouTube channel based around us taking trips and traveling and our adventures. Part of our adventures while we travel outside of the United States, and part of them while we're actually moving into a van and traveling around the United States with our 2 dogs. In a van. Did you catch when I said in a van? We're living in a van. Yeah, that's gonna happen. And we're gonna share travel tips and hacks and funny little stories and adventures along the way. So if you're interested in that, come join us on that channel. There's actually a link in the description below where you can find that video that I just showed you, and you can subscribe to the channel and hang out, be part of that community too. Now, really, on the suggestions. So the first mistake that we talked about was the fact that the side was just a little bit over-layered, or just kind of too thin. Now this is a very common mistake that happens and takes away from the overall structure of a bob line. So if we were to let that fill in just a little bit, this is what that could look like. Now it wouldn't take a whole lot to get this far, because if you look at this other side, you can see that she's got enough density in her hair to create a strong line. So just simply letting this fill in a little bit, letting those layers grow out a bit, will go a long way to making the overall bob look a lot more structured. Now, mistake number 2 was about the back just being too long. Like I said before, this happens all the time, and it brings the eye down the shape and just isn't as flattering as it could be. So if we brought that length up just a little bit, this is what that would look like. Now, as you can see, this starts to move us in the direction of bringing that eye back up the shape and giving it a little bit of a nicer kind of swing, we would call it. But with that said, it still, like many times with these suggestions, doesn't get us all the way. We still got a little further to go, so let's take a look at mistake number 3. So mistake number 3 dealt with the layering and just kind of not having enough layering internally and really not having enough beveling in the back, etc. So if we actually layered it just a little bit more, created a little bit more bevel down in the nape, this is what that would look like. Now you can see that we are much more in the direction of a shape that's going to look a lot more strong as far as bob shapes go. This has a nice angle to it. It follows the face structure. It helps to lift the eye up and really starts to move us in the direction of a solid bob shape. But now let's take a look at mistake number 4, which was more of the suggestion of just darkening that bottom layer just a little bit. So let's kind of back up a little bit. I want to show you what this would look like without any layering, without any of the other mistakes addressed. Let's just look at exactly what it would look like to have just the bottom actually darkened with nothing else done. This starts moving us in the direction of looking a lot denser on that bob line. But now let's see what would happen if we actually filled those layers in a bit with the depth and color. This is what that would look like. Now you can see that we're really moving in the right direction. And then once we go back to actually beveling the back and creating the right line and all of that, put all this together, and it really moves us in the direction of a solid bob shape that I think would make Lisa very happy. But why don't we move into some curveballs, because I want to talk a little bit more about some of her other concerns from her email, and I'm going to use these curveballs to kind of show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so as far as the curveballs go, there was a couple things that Lisa mentioned in her email that really kind of led me in one specific direction. Now, one of the things she mentioned was that her hair feels too flat on top when it gets too long, it looks too stringy when it gets too long, and that she just doesn't overall have the bob shape that she's been looking for. So I took those concerns into mind, and this is one of the ideas that I came up with. Now, this actually has a little bit more length than her current shape does, but if you look at it, the little bit of wave here actually is going to go a long ways to making things look denser, but also creates a certain amount of volume inherently because of the wave. So to me, this would address two of her major concerns, which were just the density concern and the lack of volume concern. But I also think that the wave adds a certain amount of softness. It just kind of really speaks well to Lisa. I think it gives it a little bit more of a movement and texture, obviously because it's wavy. But her big concern was that it just kind of lays flat. So I think this would go a long way to help that. But I also wanted to kind of show you one other option that was similar but a little bit different. Now, Lisa mentioned that she wasn't concerned to do color, so I wanted to show you one option if we actually did do some color. Now, this is that same wavy option, but if we actually went a little bit darker. Now, I did leave a little bit of lightness around the face so she wouldn't feel quite so dark, but the reason I moved towards a darker color was because darker colors have a tendency to look thicker. So if a concern is that the hair looks a little bit too thin, then the depth in the color is going to help that. I also think the depth looks really good on her skin tone, so I think it's kind of a win-win. So all in all, I think this would be a really good move. Now, keep in mind that this color on both of these two curveballs doesn't look as good as it could. It's kind of part of the photoshopping thing. I really couldn't get it kind of dialed in the way I wanted it to look, but it gives you the rough idea of what a difference just darkening that color overall can make in addressing some of the concerns that Lisa had. But as you always know, my bigger question isn't what I think, because I know what I think. The bigger question is always what you think. So now is your chance. Tell me, comment below and tell me, what do you think? Should she just reshape the current bob that she has? Should she go wavy, which is actually good because she can still wear her hair straight as well as wavy, so it's not like a steadfast change, right? So I don't think that's a bad move. Should she go darker, keep it blonde? What are your thoughts? Let me know below, and otherwise, I appreciate you hanging out. You know where to find me. Comment below. All right, and I am gonna go ahead and, you know how I do, enjoy the view. That rhymed. I am a rapper now. Did you know that? I'm a rapper now. Clearly, because I just rhymed that.
Trying to put your nose in it.